I never thought in my life that I'd be living in like a outside of the city, much less in like a suburban setting. And
Mhm.
we moved up here, and now I hate leaving the house. I really do. I kind of hate it. Like, but my wife had moved up here from New Orleans, so everything kind of sucks after living in New Orleans. It's an
Welcome, Fanatics. This is the latest entry in the Diary of Doom. I'm Dylan, and join me as we look back on the rich history of doom metal and its sister sounds based on the recounted tales of its followers. Every week, we will have a different guest to spin their yarn. You can visit the website at diaryofdoom.com, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, follow the podcast on diaryofdoom.podbean.com, and subscribe and listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you have a question or want to pitch something or what have you, you can fire off an email to diaryofdoom1968@gmail.com. Some time ago, I reached out to someone I follow on Instagram because all signs suggested they had been hacked by a crypto bot. In inquiring to them via DM, they said no, but you should really consider cashing in on whatever obvious scam they were presenting to me. Sure didn't seem like behavior for a guy I once saw in, quote, the world's most evil black metal band. Thankfully, the truth was revealed, and upon sending a follow-up message, I was relieved to find that I was no longer speaking with a Nigerian prince. Today's guest is Dean Rispler, and I promise he is way more interesting than that story, which we will probably circle back to at some point. He's based out of Catskill, New York at the moment, and Dean is a producer, musician, and runs Drugfront Records, and has played or worked with bands and artists such as the Dictators, Murphy's Law, Weird Al, his own project Swilson, Cosmo Demonic, his black and doom metal band, The Mighty High, Osaka Popestar, and has also done things with Sweet Diesel, which featured Zach Curlin, previous guest from Green Dragon and Altered States, and of course Witch Taint, which also features previous guest of the pod, Dave Hill, and last but not least, a band called Butt Steak. But you may know him best as a longtime host of Records of Ruin on Gimme Metal / Gimme Radio. So welcome to Diary of Doom, Dean. I hope you don't mind that I may have embarrassed you a little bit there.
No, even the embarrassing stuff I try to embrace.
It's all part of the history, right?
Yeah, it's all part of history. It's it's funny when people bring stuff up that I completely forget about. It's funny you bring up Butt Steak because I haven't listened to that stuff in a long time. I produced Butt Steak, and then I actually produced the members of Butt Steak went on to do another band that was even better called the Lee Harvey Keitel Band, which record is amazing, but never did anything because the band basically broke up as soon as the record was done.
Lee Harvey Keitel, I love that.
Yeah, the Lee Harvey Keitel Band. They were great. And the old bass player from Butt Steak, he went on to co-open. He was one of the co-owners of Otto Bar in Baltimore.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of Otto Bar.
Yeah,
I've definitely never been there, but
yeah, it's a great spot. It's a great spot, and Mike Bowen is his name. He was the old bass player. He's actually become a really prolific artist. I actually have a piece of art of his that I bought not too long ago that I really like. But I embrace all of it. Even that's not embarrassing. The name Butt Steak may be embarrassing for some, but the band was not embarrassing. The band was great. They were a really cool band. But there's way more embarrassing stuff in my past that I'm more than willing to talk about. But I'd rather not.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've been at it for a long time, doing stuff and being involved in the local music scene. Yeah. And I wanted to have you on the podcast because you strike me as someone who's always remained a fan of music
Oh yeah,
throughout your career, like
yeah.
regardless of you being a musician or a producer and all that. So, like, what are your earliest experiences with music? Did you have a musical upbringing, or did you discover it on your own?
My mom was a self-taught musician. She had a piano in the house, and she had a guitar. She had guitars in the house, like acoustic guitars and some other cheapo electric guitar. And she was really into music, like listening to music and playing. She played piano pretty well, and she sang really well, actually. So I was always surrounded by music, and we had a split level. Where I grew up, I was born in Brooklyn, but then we moved out to Long Island when I was about 3 years old, and we had the split level house. So there wasn't really a basement per se, but it was like the lower level had like a den with a TV, and there was a stereo there, like an old crappy stereo. I used to just go down there and listen to my parents' 45s, like Chuck Berry and a lot of Tommy James and the Shondells and stuff like that, like like 50s and 60s rock and roll stuff that I totally loved. And it seemed like every kid that I grew up with that's the first stuff they heard, was the stuff that their parents grew up on, which was all like 50s rock and roll and 50s and 60s rock and roll. So I got really into that as a young kid, and honestly, that's still, I would say that's, as much as heavy metal and punk rock completely changed my life when I got into it, I will go on record saying that 50s and 60s rock and roll, like early stuff, is still my absolute favorite. There's a station up here, a radio station called WGNY, that I found when I was up here. It's like an amazing oldie station, and that's on in my house and in my car. That's what 80% of my day is listening to, is just listening to like 50s and 60s and early 70s oldies, what would be called oldies now, because when we were growing up, 70s stuff was new.
Yeah.
But I mean, like now anything that's 20 years old is considered vintage. But believe me, I don't find anything. When people talk about 90s being oldies, I get really upset, because I grew up during that time, and that shit sucked when it happened. So
I was a kid then, so
was,
I mean,
yeah.
we kind of occupy a weird space, because now there's a generation below me that, like, I grew up understanding like what the oldies were, because like my grandparents, I grew up with like my mom's grandparents, and my mom grew up with that, and she told me about the stuff that she was into, because she was a punk back in the day too. But now you show somebody that, they're probably like, what the fuck? Like it's weird to be my age and be feeling like that. That's kind of strange. And now I can only imagine you're like, oh man, thinking about 50s from the perspective of Gen Z has got to be wild.
Yeah, definitely. It's just funny to me when I meet people who talk about the 90s when it's like oldies, and that's kind of mind blowing. But also for me personally, like, I mean, since I grew up, since I was a somewhat cognitive adult musician, coming out as a musician in the 90s, like a touring musician. Like I started touring when it was like 1992, 92, 93, to be around all of that stuff. And like, I still hate it. Like, I still hate the 90s are like the most disappointing decade for me. It was like, the only stuff I could go back and listen to. There's very few things from the 90s that I could go back and listen to, because everything took a really weird turn. Like the 90s was still embracing that late 80s shitty fucking production value, like these giant drums with the vocals all the way up front and everything kind of pushed back, and like fucking like Hysteria by Def Leppard. Like I loved the first like 3 Def Leppard records, and then Hysteria comes out, and it's just like, this is not even music anymore. It's like what became of Aerosmith. It's like, it's not even, there's no guitar. I don't even hear guitars on this. Like I don't even know what this is. It doesn't make any sense to me. It was like an embrace of everything that was shitty about pop and new wave, like shoved into like a so-called hard rock heavy metal package. And that was happening across the board, like even death metal, which if you look at the night, for me, this is me being really extreme, and I speak in extremes a lot, so take that for what it is. for me, the 90s, the only thing great about the 90s, the only great is like death metal and early 90s up to like 95 hip hop. Now, both of those genres suffered from terrible productions. Like, I mean, if you listen to, like, it's hard for me to go back and listen to like some of these early death metal records from the 90s because they sound so terrible. Like, they were trying to put that sound, like there was a trend, you know, like this late 80s, early 90s trend of how things sounded. They were still putting that stamp on genres that it made no sense with. It made sense with the hip hop because hip hop was about the beat and the vocals, right? That made sense, but it wasn't about that with death metal. It wasn't like don't get me wrong, the beat and the vocals really are an integral part of it, but that wasn't what was supposed to be featured. Like the guitars get swallowed up and it's just really tinny kind of sound. Plus, I hated grunge. Like, I fucking hated it. Like, all that grunge explosion.
You're like the first person to come on here and say I hated grunge.
Oh, I fucking hate it. Like, when it comes to grunge, like I love Mudhoney. Mudhoney was great because they sound like the Stooges, and I love the Stooges. And they, you know, you could call them grunge, but they were basically the Stooges. They sound exactly like the Stooges, so I love. They sound like Stooges meets Blue Cheer. I'm fine with that. But Nirvana, Pearl Jam, all that shit. Oh God, I fucking hated it. I still hate it. Don't get me wrong. I recognize the brilliance of good songwriting, and I know that Nirvana wrote great songs. I just cannot stand it. I cannot stand like 1 second of Pearl Jam. I can't stand it. I fucking hate Soundgarden. I fucking hate all that shit. I fucking can't stand. I hear it on the perfect example in the late 90s, 2000s. I used to listen to music on a little boombox when I took a shower. I kept the boombox like on top of the mirror, like the medicine cabinet. So I used to go in the shower and listen to music, right? And I used to switch between, at the time, it was basically switching between 3 stations. It was 104.3, the classic rock station.
Yep.
And then 101.1, which is WCBS, which is the oldie station, which is really not the same anymore. And then there, for a little while in New York, I don't know if you remember, there was a 101.9, which was doing like alternative rock. And they would play some punk stuff and stuff. So I'd switch between them if, you know, when I could. So, but when you go in the shower, you have to switch to one and go in the shower. There were certain bands that were considered like I would step out of the shower for, like, to get the whole place wet to turn off the station. Like, I hate Journey. I hate Boston. I fucking hate Supertramp. Remember, I totally respect these guys' songwriting, and I recognize their brilliance, and I totally support them making money, and I understand why people like them, but I can't stand it. And along with that was like modern station. Whenever I could hear feedback in seconds, I'd be like, "That's fucking Soundgarden. Step out of the shower and change it." Like, I fucking can't. I can't stand it. Like like that whole early 90s, mid 90s sound. Like I hear it, and it just like Allison Chains. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, I totally respect the songs and respect like everything. I hear it, and it just rubs me the wrong way. Like this chills go up my spine in the worst possible way. And like, oh, I can't stand it. I got to change the channel. So that stuff, I just hate it. I hated it. I found it all really empty to me. Like, even going back, and like, I accept some of it. Like Allison Chains is a perfect example, a band that like kind of grew on me a little bit. Like, I understand why people like it. I won't change the channel now as soon as it comes on. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that other stuff, like I can't hear it. So Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana, like if I hear it, I can't, you know.
Like, I think part of the issue maybe there is that like grunge so quickly became like a mockery of itself. And then you had that whole slew of imitation bands like, you know, Creed and all the gravel voice guys. And like, obviously those are not very good bands. They're pretty easy to dunk on. I remember back in like high school, I was pretty like into Pearl Jam, but like, I don't know. I feel kind of like a little embarrassed about it, you know? Like,
listen, with Pearl Jam, as far as respect goes for the band, like I have the utmost respect for those guys, because those guys worked harder than anybody. Those guys, when that record came out, now don't get me wrong, they were lucky and very lucky that they were like part of the first wave of bands all of a sudden just going straight to the majors. Like they went straight to the majors, which is unheard of. But they went for the right reasons, because whoever signed them knew, like, not only saw money signs, but they knew this band is not going to stop working. They toured for a year and a half on that first record, like a full year and a half. They just toured. I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing. Even though I can't stand it, I have nothing but respect for how they worked it and how they continued working it, and even worked on their own. They became sort of a major label DIY band, not unlike the Grateful Dead. They just did whatever they wanted. And fans, the label really couldn't tell them what to do. They just did whatever they wanted, and the fans stuck with them, which is amazing and fantastic. Great career. I just can't stand it. I can't stand hearing that stuff at all.
I couldn't tell you what the last Pearl Jam song that came out was.
No, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know at all. As a matter of fact, my wife grew up in Seattle. She grew up in West Seattle, and her sister actually lives down the block from Eddie Vedder.
Huh.
And he's a great dude. Like, everyone in the neighborhood loves him. And matter of fact, we went to some show. They have a record store down there, a really great record store called Easy Street Records in West Seattle. And they have in-store shows. I went to go see an artist, Alan Johannes, who used to play. He played with
Queens of the Stone Age
and a bunch of other bands. We have a lot of mutual. My wife knows who he is, and we have a bunch of mutual friends. And so we saw the sign up that he was playing while we were there. So we went, and before the set, some guy comes on stage and he's talking about Alan, really, really nice stuff about Alan. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I guess this guy works here. I don't know who he is. And so when we left the show, I was like, who was that guy who came on stage and saying, was that one of the owners? And he's like, no, that was Eddie Vedder. I didn't even know who it was. He looked like a just Joe Schmo normal guy. He was wearing a baseball cap, but I wouldn't have ever known who it was. So I thought it was like one of the owners of Easy Street talking like how great Alan is, but it turned out to be Eddie Vedder. So that's how far out of it from that world I am. But that was cool. But that being said, coming back around to all the grunge stuff, it just hit me the wrong way. Like I said, I like, as far as Sub Pop stuff goes, I love Mudhoney, and I absolutely love The Fluid, but that's it. That those two bands were like, compared to all those other bands, are kind of anomalies. Like Mudhoney was basically a retro Blue Cheer meets the Stooges, and Fluid were like New York Dolls MC5, so that's why I loved it. But all those other bands, and across the board, I'm not just gonna Sub Pop, across the whole board, like Merge Records, Matador, all these labels, like those are records. Like I was a record collector. I bought records. Believe me, if I could send all those records back and get my money back, I would. I would. Like I want to sue Merge and Sub Pop and Matador for making me buy these shitty fucking records. These shitty fucking totally forgettable garbage records. Like garbage, like absolute garbage. It's completely forgettable. Like records that are worth money now. Like I should probably go through my shit and sell it.
Probably sell it on Discogs. I'm sure someone would buy it up.
Yeah, I'm sure, but totally forgettable. Like absolutely forgettable garbage. And don't get me wrong, every, this is just part of life. Every label, I'm sure there's tons of labels that I bought stuff from that are just forgettable stuff. But I mean, like, it's just amazing. I just look back and how much time and energy I put into buying some of these records, and completely forgettable stuff. But that's the 90s for you, But it seemed to have gotten worse. The 2000s weren't much better, but at least there was a little bit of the desert rock thing kind of helped towards the 90s. Like at least there was an explosion of like cool retro rock, with Queens of the Stone Age, and
there was like an underground. There was all like in the 90s and through the 2000s, there was this underground sort of sludge brewing up. And it didn't really bubble up. It really kind of just like was there, and the independent metal scene and hardcore scene. Well, I don't know about hardcore. I won't speak on that. I'm not an expert there, but like there was definitely that whole string of bands where they're like, yeah, we fucking love hardcore. It's all like good shit. Stuff that you weren't hearing bands talk about really. And they were all kind of coasting on that underground for a while before it eventually kind of like seeped in, as I like to say, with the advent of technology and the internet and shit like that. So like, when did you start to get into metal and or like heavy music, and do you have a landmark album that you think was like, I'm gonna check more of this shit out?
Yeah, I mean, when I was really young, I must have been about 9 or 10 years old. I was definitely like 8 or 9 years old, and the first I was listening to the radio nonstop, like all the time. So I fell in love with everything that was cool on the radio to me, like what really like at and of course you're extremely impressionable at 8, 9 years old, like, and what totally got me was I heard I remember hearing Pink Floyd's The Wall had come out 79, and that song was the single was Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 with I Don't Need No Education. So I heard that as an 8, 9-year-old kid who fucking hated school so much, hated it, and I heard that and I was like, holy shit, this is someone singing about like
me,
fuck the teachers and fuck the school and fuck everybody, and we don't need this. And that became like me and my friends' immediate anthem. We couldn't believe what we were hearing. We were hearing someone say, on the radio, fuck school, like this was our generation, School's Out, by Alice Cooper. It was like, but it was even more direct. Whereas School's Out is more like kitschy and fun. It was on the fucking Muppet Show and shit. Whereas like that's like more fun. This was like serious. This was serious. This was like, fuck the teachers. We're the kids. Fuck everybody. It was like this was our. This was over the edge, but in musical form for us. So that was the big deal, and that blew up so heavy on the radio and Pink Floyd was already gigantic. So I fell in love with Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd kind of embraces a lot of, they're a genre kind of on their own, and which embraces a lot of different kind of genres. There's definitely some real heavy stuff in there, super heavy, and there's definitely psychedelic, and there's no doubt that krautrock bands and drone bands and stoner rock bands all took from them. There's no doubt about that. So I learned a lot from them. And then as a little kid, seeing, in the 70s, rock and roll was king. There was really nothing else. It was like, so like you go to the store, like the local stores, like the Five and Dime that sold like T-shirts and posters and stuff. You see, when you're a kid, you see these bands, and so you see all the posters, and you see like Black Sabbath posters. It's totally scary to you as a kid, and I was attracted to that stuff. I was like, oh, this is me right here. This is what I want to see. Like I see pictures of Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and Lynyrd Skynyrd and AC/DC, and I was like, these are the people these are my people. I could tell already. I could tell at a really young age. It's like, oh, these are my people. And then of course there was like the burnout kids in the neighborhood were wearing Black Sabbath jackets and Led Zeppelin shit. So I was, if I heard it on the radio, I was like intent to like listen, and that's how I just fell in love with all that, like Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and where I in the block where I grew up, there were a bunch of older kids who were all into that stuff. So I heard it all the time. I got exposed to all that stuff really at a really young age, and then just started craving more and more. And I remember being 10 years old and buying Blizzard of Oz on cassette, because I'd seen pictures of Ozzy, and so I saw that record cover, and I'm like, what the fuck is this, dude? This looks crazy. And that was a huge influence on my life, hearing that record and hearing Randy Rhoads, and that got me really into the metal. Like that's from then on, I just wanted faster and harder, and then it became like at that age, everything moved so fast. You know, at 12 years old, I was totally 100% into metal. And by 13 years old, I was already looking to buy Discharge and Dead Kennedys records, because I just wanted faster and more nastier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like anything that was faster, nastier, and crazier. You know, it was like, I remember, you know, at 12 years old hearing Motorhead, and then, you know, I was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And then from there, it was like, you know, I just wanted more. I just wanted more. And then, so that stuff kind of just combination enhanced and ruined my life. That's basically it, you know. So, you know, I just wanted more weirder shit, you know, the weird, and that's, you know, you know, if you go that direction and you have an open mind, you start listening to more and more weird shit, and just all encompassing. It was, you know, besides all the metal stuff that I loved, all of a sudden it was like punk rock, whatever you want to call it. You know, I started getting into New York Dolls and, you know, Dead Kennedys, and I remember getting into like Dead Boys and Lords of the New Church, and just anything that was cool to me, I just loved. It was all encompassing, you know, but you know, I just loved it all. I was really lucky that I was surrounded by all this stuff, and also surrounded by, I was lucky that other people that I met who saw me buying records were like, oh, if you like this, you like this, you know, maybe you should check this out, and this, that. So I was really lucky that to have my mind opened by this kind of stuff. And you know, by the time I was, you know, 14, 15 years old, I was like, you know, full blown record collecting everything, you know, everything rock and roll. That definitely became just music became a complete obsession, you know, at that point. You know, it was like I just knew that it wasn't just, oh, I was buying records. It was a lifestyle. This is a complete lifestyle change. You know, like this was who I was. You know, the kind of people who were into this stuff and making this kind of stuff, whether metal or punk or even like, you know, weirdo shit. Like I wouldn't even know where to put some of this music. You know, like I got into, you know, even at a young age, I was into like the Residents, the krautrock shit, like Can and Faust and Noise.
Mm-hmm.
I was into weird stuff, you know, all around, you know, and I was studying music. I was taking guitar lessons, and I was also studying music in school. So I was turned on to classical and jazz, and you know, and of course I was attracted to the weird shit and that, you know, I was like into Stravinsky and all the serialism stuff, and then I was into, you know, with jazz, like I was in, you know, like I got introduced to free jazz and the hard bop stuff and all the 60s posts, you don't even know what to call it. Like it's like psychedelic jazz, like, you know, like Love Supreme, post Love Supreme Coltrane stuff, like Africa and Ohm and Ornette Coleman, and you know, it just got crazier and crazier. Like anything that was weird and interesting, I got into, and then sometimes you work backwards, you know, you're like, oh, what did this artist do beforehand? And then, you know, you start getting into all this other stuff, and, you know, and I was exposed to country at a young age too, because my dad was a traveling salesman, listened to country all the time. He liked it. So I was exposed to country, and I got into that stuff too. And it just got a complete obsession across the board, like just music in general, mostly rock and roll. Like I could go off on other tangents, but it was all encompassing, and that was it. You know, that was all I cared about. Really, that was all I cared about was music and records and everything, all the ephemera that went along with that.
What's like, you know, you said it's like an obsession. What do you think is like the most extreme thing you did to get a record?
Well, I don't know if it was so extreme, but you know, when I got into record collecting, I was living out in Long Island, you know, so I would,
mm-hmm.
you know, get friends of mine to go into the city with me. Like we'd take the train into the city, and then we'd go to, at the time in the 80s, West 8th Street, which is now like nothing's there, you know, nothing cool's there. But at the time in the 80s, that whole block, West 8th Street, between Broadway and 6th Avenue, or, you know, that was all record stores. that whole block was like Revolver Records, Venus Records. It's Only Rock and Roll was down there. There were all these record stores like on that block, and we would just go there and go to every record store. It was really real tunnel vision. It was really, I look back and it was like we would make fun. As a matter of fact, when we got a little older and started going to different places in the city, we would make fun of ourselves. We were like, wow, we really didn't leave this block for like hours. Like we were just on that block for like hours and hours and hours at record stores on one block, like 1 or 2 blocks. And the rest of the city was just like standing there. We could have went to a bunch of other cool spots and cool stores, but we would just like, I was like stuck in like, I'd stay in one record store for like 3 hours and go to the next store for like 3 hours. Next thing you know, it's like, okay, we got to go home. It's like, it's nighttime. So we got to go home. So it was kind of obsessive with that. But I used to, I made a lot of friends who really weren't, they were into music, but I made a lot of friends become part-time record collectors who really weren't, who really didn't need that in their life. It's funny. Like I speak to friends now I'm still very close to who are very thankful about everything I turned them on to. So I was very intuitive with certain friends, even if they didn't have the same taste. I kind of knew what they'd be into. That's how into music I was. Like I had friends who were like really good friends who were really into the Beatles. They like pop music. So it's like, but I knew what stuff they would be into that I turned them on to. Like I was also into the jangly Paisley power pop 80s, retro explosion, like early REM, Rain Parade, all that, all the retro garage stuff, Flesh Tones and Raunch Hands and stuff like that. So I knew all this stuff. So when someone was like, oh, I'm into this, I'm like, oh, then you should hear this and this and that. And I turn all these people onto this stuff that they were like, holy shit, I never knew this stuff existed. So they're all really thankful, but also they're all, like, why did I buy all this stuff? They weren't obsessed with records. Like, why do I have all these records? Oh, it's because
you were the most extreme thing that happened.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of them, I still have friends who still to this day thank me for turning them on to all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But it's just funny, but they're like, what am I going to do with all, they're giving away their vinyl now, even though they shouldn't, but they're giving it away because they're like, I don't listen to this stuff. What am I doing? But as far as, records go, I think I'm weirdly more extreme now with records. Now it's, since the vinyl re-explosion of vinyl in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, now it's like these companies, especially metal and punk, they know who their buyers are, and they're purposely doing this stuff, which I'm into, but it's also really annoying. They're purposely putting out like first pressing of 100 or 200 on this colored vinyl or this special edition, and then it's gone. So it's like I become obsessed with that. Like I'll be like, I gotta get this, and so I'll become obsessed with that and be like, like setting alarms to wake up early in the morning for when a record goes on sale. So I think that's a little weird and extreme, even for me. Like I thought that was weird,
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, their bands and labels are doing like cool things and cool releases, like, let alone they're putting out really cool bands and shit like that. Like, yeah. They're putting out like cool packages. This comes with a T-shirt, comes with an art book, whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah, like my friend's band. That band Savage Master. That?
I haven't really listened to them, but I definitely know of them.
They're Adam from Savage Master, old friend of mine. He used to be in Hookers, and he was also in Nashville Pussy back in early days.
Yeah.
And he was also in a band called Brothers of Conquest, whose record I produced one of their records for Go Kart, and we became really close friends. So he's in that band, and like their new record, the very first pressing, they only did 50 copies of it's like a clear vinyl, but inside the vinyl there's like fake blood that moves around, like,
oh, that's cool.
And I was about to buy, I was like, I got to get this. It was $150 because there was only 50 made, right? And I was like, should I buy this? And I'm like, I can't justify this $150 for a record that I shouldn't even be opening. You know, like it should just stay in the packaging. So like, I can't do it. But part of me still feels like, oh, I should have done it. But it's like, that's how obsessive things get. You know, should I get this? Should I get this? Like, I'm really into this band, Crippled Black Phoenix. You know that band?
Yeah, that's one of the dudes from Electric Wizard, right?
I don't know if it's from Electric Wizard. It's Justin used to be an Iron Monkey.
Okay.
Yeah, I know him from the Verukers. He used to be the drummer from the Verukers. But he, his whole, they have a new record coming out very soon in Season of Mist, and I'm like kind of obsessed with that band, and so I bought like the Die Hard version, pre-ordered it was like $100 with like a triple record set came with like a mask, you know. She's like, I'm buying it. I'm like, yeah, I got to get this, and I buy it. I'm like, did I really need this? I really need like a mask and like all this crazy shit. No, I don't. You know, I really don't. But I wanted it. You know, so even for me, even while buying it, I'm like, what am I doing? What the I mean, I should be saving money for the mortgage, you know, rather than spending. Like, I bought the Voivod box set the other day.
Yeah,
when it came out, because I'm a huge Voivod fan. So I'm like, I have to buy this. It has all this cool shit in it. I have to buy. I have all the records already. I have all those records already. It's like I just bought a box that's going to sit there, but I had to get it. You know, same thing like the first two Metallica box sets. Like, I had to get them. They're still sealed. I still have them sealed. I haven't even opened them. Why would I open them? Because I have those records already.
And you just listen to the ones you've listened your whole life.
Yeah, and the funniest thing is like it's just an upset. It's a problem. That's a real problem. That's like, luckily, that's my, as far as collecting goes, that's my really, as far as collecting and addiction goes, that's my only real problem. Like I luckily I never, like this could have been all drugs, and luckily it wasn't,
You could have gotten really into craft beer.
Exactly.
I used to go to some people's houses and like they were collectors, and I'm like, this isn't a collection. This is just crates of beer.
No, you're absolutely right. I didn't expect it's funny because when I was a kid and I met record collectors, I thought it was so cool. You go over to the house. I remember going to people's houses and they'd have like records all over the wall and shit. They'd have like picture discs on the ceiling and all this cool shit. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But at the same time, I was like, even at that young age, as much as I wanted that, I wanted my house to look like a record store. As much as I wanted that, I was also like, do I really, at the same time, I was also fighting. I was like, do I really need this? Do I really, am I listening to records or am I a collector? It's like, what's more important, And obviously listening to records and soaking it all in and soaking it in as a musician and refiltering it through your own creativity and playing is way more important than all this collection. But here I am with thousands and thousands of records and all this ephemera, box sets, unopened box sets. Fucking ridiculous. Like I could show you, like I remember being so psyched when that fucking Venom box set came out. It's still sealed. I haven't even had time to open it. Like I have all these records that is like still sealed because I just haven't had time to open it. And since I moved here a year ago, I still haven't set up the record. Like everything's a mess. Like we're still doing.
Yeah.
So I'm buying records and not even listening to them. I'm buying records and listening to them on Bandcamp or on, if it doesn't have a digital download, listening to it on Spotify or YouTube. So like I have a stack of records like this big, still sealed, just sitting there.
I know. I mean, mine's probably pales in comparison, but I mean, I'm looking at it and like I've been taking stuff from like my mom's collection, and so I have like the weirdest fucking record collection probably, and it's pretty small things considered, but yeah, I've still got about probably like 120 like albums to get through, and I'm like, that's probably not going to happen by the end of the year.
No. And it's funny you say that because I when my mom, decided to get rid of all her stuff, there wasn't many records that I wanted, but I did take some stuff from her. And also I was really lucky that cousins and friends during the CD explosion were just giving their vinyl away. So I have a lot of cool records that people just gave me. Like I got really lucked out with that, but definitely a weird collection. There's definitely some weird shit in there, like stuff I would never buy. but to have, because it got through friends and stuff like that. So definitely some weirdo stuff in there. But it's cool, and it's also, and at this age, it's also cool then when people come over and they go through your record collection and like, oh, you have this, and we're all listening to stuff. It hasn't been a while, but like I said, I haven't even hooked up the turntable here because it's just been a absolute fucking mess in the new house with renovation and stuff. But that's a whole other story.
So, like, given that you work in music production and like I've had a few guests on who work in production or engineering, does it give you any kind of unique position on listening to music, or do you have to put yourself in a different state of mind when you're listening for pleasure as opposed to work?
Yes to all. If something's recorded in a way that I think is shitty or wrong or just bizarre choices that I would never want to hear or don't like, sometimes I have to put myself outside of it and just try to listen to the song, but I have friends who are engineers and producers who there's certain music they just can't listen to because it's recorded so shitty.
Like early black metal.
Yeah, early black metal, which at the time when I first heard it was a problem for me. I was like, why is it, this sounds terrible. Like all this stuff sounds terrible. Same thing with like early death metal. Like early death metal at the time when it came out, I just didn't get it. When it first came out, of all, the stuff I liked was the stuff that wasn't, when I first heard the Cookie Monster kind of vocals, like the really deep.
Yeah.
I did not get that. Now I like it. Now I understand that it's cool. Now I'm like, I like some of it, but like the early death metal I liked was like Death and Obituary, stuff like that. That was more like the vocals were a little more on the black metal side. They're not
or like a hardcore yell.
Yeah, more like that rather than like the deep. That took me a long time to get used to and start liking it. I just did not get it when it first came out. And also that early death metal stuff, especially in the 90s, the production was so terrible. Like some of the production was just so bad that it was like really hard to listen to. Like you just focused in on like one or two things like this, this.
Oh yeah, and I mean, who wanted to produce that at that time?
Yes.
It was such off the grid.
Yeah. Plus, it's just funny because then some of the bad production became a trend. The bad production of this pingy snare and really clicky kick drum became like a trend that other people tried to copy. And I was like, why are people into this? This is terrible. but then it became like sort of a funny trend. Like that now it's like a retro trend, like all the pingy stuff it's almost like a joke and it's funny, but and sometimes it works. Sometimes it really works. In the 90s, even with 90s and early 2000s indie rock stuff, there was a lot of this trend to record on, like perfect example would be Guided by Voices recording on a 4-track, everything was done on 4-track, really cheap, like unbelievably cheap, cost them nothing, just to do 4-track recordings. When I first heard that stuff, I was like really kind of taken aback. I was like, what is this? But you have to kind of overlook it sometimes to hear the brilliance of the song. If the song's good, the song's good. Like if it doesn't matter if it's recorded terribly. It could have been better. It might have been better for the song and the artist to record them better, but that's what they did at the time. And I have a friend who's a brilliant engineer. He recognizes the good songs from that first Strokes record. That when that Strokes record came out, there's good. I don't like the Strokes, but there's good songs on. There's no doubt that there's good, memorable songs on there.
Mm-hmm.
But my friend, like for months, my friend's like, I can't listen to this record. It's the worst snare drum I've ever heard in my life, and this is the worst. And blah blah. He kept like focusing in on it, and sometimes you just have to like stop and just listen to it as a song and be like, okay, this is a great song, without focusing in on everything that you hate about it.
And it's also like, it depends on like your audience too. Like somebody, you can have like really tight production and stuff like that, and on kind of whatever you want to call it, oddball music, but it's still not going to be like marketable to a bigger audience. Cause the Strokes were clearly going for like a bigger audience. I don't know if they were going for like U2 level audience, but at least like they were going for a pretty big shot. So like in that sense, people who are listening to that on the norm, on the reg, are they're probably not going to pick up on it, and it doesn't really matter because they're going to
exactly.
hear some other aspect of it.
Exactly.
But then, we can put on a fucking Obituary album and everyone's going to say, this sounds like one song and the guy's yelling and I don't know what he's saying and all the guitar riffs are the same. But then we'll be like, nah, man, just listen.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other side of that, and especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, though this was a thing that happened throughout the history of music, there was stuff that was overproduced that sounds great and the band's really not that good. Like perfect example of the there's a lot of great examples of this, but I remember the two biggest examples at the time when I was getting really into production and stuff, and then just constantly listening to music. I remember remember that band Jet.
Oh yeah,
Jet. They had a couple of big hits like
yeah.
Are You Gonna Be My Girl or something like that.
Yeah.
So like that when that record came out, it's still
just the Beatles ripoff band.
Yeah, but it sounds amazing. That record sounds amazing. Like
it's super slick.
The sound is amazing. The vocals sound great. Everything sounds amazing. And then I remember buying that record and listening to it. I'm like, wow, this record really sounds great. There's only really those two songs, but as far as sounds go, wow, it's great. And then I remember seeing them live on Saturday Night Live. Because I remember they came on Saturday Night Live, and I was like psyched. I was like, oh, good, I'm Jet. I just got the record. I'll see them on. And they were the fucking worst. I mean, the worst, like the worst. It sounded terrible. I mean, absolutely horrible. And I'm like, wow, maybe it was just a bad night. This is terrible. So then I watched some more live footage of them, and they can't play at all. They can't play at all. Like it was all the record. And the same thing happened with that dance artist. Remember MIA?
Yes.
MIA had a huge hit with the sample from the Clash,
Clash. Paper Planes, massive.
Yeah, and that song's amazing. And some of the other tracks on the record is really cool. And then I saw her oldest live footage, and it was the worst shit I've ever heard in my life. Like, it was like, oh, this woman had a hit before she was a performer. Like, she never performed before. She came into the studio, did these songs, and then never was a performer. And it shows, because live, it is fucking embarrassingly terrible. Like, absolutely off the wall, embarrassingly terrible. Like early hip hop, like when early hip hop groups tried to tour, like 9 out of 10 of them sounded terrible live. It was like the worst live show ever. Like, they didn't know what they were doing. It didn't translate, it didn't translate at all. Like, it just was like, it looked dumb and sounded dumb. Like, there was only a few that really took control of how to do a live show and how to present themselves. They were just used to being a studio project. It's just funny. It's like, it could go either way, because then there's bands who are like, their records sound really dirgy and kind of lo-fi, and then you see them live and it's explosive,
Yeah.
So, it's like totally explosive,
Well, speaking of bands that sound muddy and stuff, and this is a doom metal podcast, like, when did you start checking out doom and stoner and sludge, and and who are your favorites?
I always was a huge being from New York, I forget to say the H sometimes. Being a huge Black Sabbath fan.
It's okay. I think we all got used to hearing the word huge getting thrown around a lot.
My wife makes fun of me all the time about it. So, but being a huge Black Sabbath fan, that stuff was easy for me to get into. I love that stuff so much, and even some Pink Floyd stuff could be really doomy at times. So I liked all that kind of drony, doomy kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of what was the first. I guess what we're trying to figure out, what was the first like retro doom or early stoner stuff.
It all kind of gets lumped together. I mean, you could throw the Melvins in there for all.
Well, I love the Melvins.
You know what I mean?
See, here's the funny thing. Like, when I was going to school, when I was going to college and hanging out with all these other record collectors, that's when I first got introduced to the Melvins in like 1988 or something, or 87 or 88. And I loved that immediately. I loved that Gluey Porch Treatments and Ozma. I love those two records immediately. And I've seen them. I've probably seen the Melvins. Like, I'm not an obsessive Melvins fan. I was in the beginning, and I saw them so many times. I've seen them over the years, probably like 15 times, right? I didn't keep up with them because it started it started sounding really samey to me after a while. Like I couldn't really remember the songs. I mean, they were always great live, but I
Hmm.
think I stopped buying records after like Houdini or Stoner Witch, one of
Hmm.
those records, like one of the ones from the '90s. I stopped buying records, but I used to go see them live all the time, and they were amazing live. And they definitely brought in a bunch of other bands, like influenced a lot of other bands that were started doing the same type of stuff. But Melvins they were really special, especially those first few records are really special. And then there's a lot of stuff in that genre that I really don't like. People, like I remember when as a kid I was really into SST records and seeing those St. Vitus records. And I was like, oh, this looks like something I would really like. And I don't like it. I could
Huh.
I could go on record saying I don't like St. Vitus, the band. Don't like it at all. Don't like The Obsessed. Don't like that at all. Don't like anything Wino's done. I've seen him a bunch of times. Super nice dude. He plays great. I just not into it. Like I find it really unmemorable, like super unmemorable. Like if you held a gun to my head, I couldn't sing you back one St. Vitus song or one Obsessed song or Spirit Caravan. Same thing with Electric Wizard. I don't like that either. Like I think the whole concept is great. The look is great. Some of the sounds are cool, but I couldn't I couldn't sing you back one note of one song. Like it's just totally boring to me. Totally
Hmm.
boring. Like really not anything special to me. But there's other stuff that, that I love, like as far as retro stuff like that. Like I love Uncle Acid. Like the Uncle Acid records are
Hmm.
really good because every record they've done is at least one or two great memorable songs on there. So like I like the way they play. I like the whole concept. I think they're doing, even if you call it a ripoff, I like their whole look. They're doing the same kind of look that Electric Wizard's doing with the retro horror thing, but I just like the way they do it better.
Hmm.
I just think they do it better with better songs. There's the songs and better playing. That's just me. Like there's some stuff and with this same thing with like I was never. I love the first Queens of the Stone Age record, but that's pretty much about it. Like I don't really I like there's some stuff on the second record I like, but that's it. Like I don't like anything past that second record at all.
Like you want to talk about overproduced? Is the last record they did was not.
Well, a lot of their records even are overproduced. Like Songs for the Deaf is totally
Yeah.
overproduced. I just don't, I love that first record so much.
Hmm.
Like that. And it's funny because I don't really like Caius. Like Caius, like people think I'm crazy. You don't like Caius? What are you talking about? It's like I don't. I just didn't hit me correctly. Like I just didn't like. I don't get me wrong. They're great players, and I understand why people like them, and I understand their influence. It just doesn't hit me right. Like it didn't hit me. Like all the Caius stuff that I heard from day one that I wanted to like didn't hit me as hard as that first Queens of the Stone Age record. That record was like, wow, this is the pinnacle of desert rock. That started a whole trend. That whole those guys, and I'm saying this out of complete respect because I'm really close with Dave Catching, who played in Queens of the Stone Age, and he was in Queens of the Stone Age, and my wife is really close with the Caius guys. That's how she knows Dave and stuff. Is that she used to tour with Caius. She went out with Hutch, their old sound guy for many years, who's a
Mm.
brilliant sound guy, great guy. That's part of her life, and I'm really good friends with Dave Catching, who owns Rancho de la Luna, where they did all this stuff, the desert sessions, all that kind of shit. A lot of it, it's none of it's bad. It's just doesn't. It's what I
Doesn't do it
remember.
for you.
It doesn't do it for me. I don't remember it. I don't remember it. If I don't remember it, like that's a problem. That's a problem for me. It's like I look at music in really two ways to simplify it. There's the most important thing is songs. That's the most important thing in music. It's like songs. Like, do you remember the song? Do I remember every Chuck Berry song? Yes, I remember every single fucking Chuck Berry song because Chuck Berry rules, right? He rules. Same thing with like, do I remember almost every Clearwater Revival song or Tom Petty song? Yes, because those guys know how to write songs. Slightly under that is what's next and what's important next is the sound. There's plenty of music that I love that's not quote unquote memorable, but I love the sound. Like I love like Krautrock is a perfect example. Like Can, Faust, Noi, Amandul 2, all these kind of bands. It's like, do I remember the songs? Maybe one or two songs from one or two of those bands. But it's the sound I love. That's why I love soundtrack music. Like I listen to soundtracks all the time, like Jerry Goldsmith and John Carpenter and shit like that. Howard Shore. Do I remember the songs? Not so much. But do I remember the sound? What it sounded like? Yeah, like Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk has amazing songs, but it's a lot about the sound. You know, it's a lot about the sound. Like I love like that band Zombie. Like I don't
love that band.
Yeah, I love that band. I don't remember the song so well, but I love the sound. Like I could listen to that shit all fucking day. You know, I love that stuff. You know, like same thing like Godspeed You Black Emperor. Like there's no songs there, but it's a cool sound. You know, it's like a cool sound. Like it's great background music and it's cool.
Yeah.
It's great driving music, and I like that a lot. That to me is the most important thing. So like that's what it is for me. It's like either I remember the songs, number one, that's 80% of it. The 20%, that's the sound. Yeah, there's certain bands that like I hear it and it sounds cool, but I walk away and I don't remember it anymore. Or I remember, or you know, if I'm lucky, if the band has a really great sound, I'll remember the sound. That doesn't mean I'll remember the song, but I remember the sound, and that's important. You know, look at like a lot of industrial music. There's plenty of industrial music out there that I don't remember the songs, but I know the sound. You know, and I'm like, oh, first time hearing Big Black, first time hearing Big Black, I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, I went the same way.
It's like, what the fuck is this insane guitar sound? Like absolutely chainsaw fucking scary guitar sound over fucking these crazy mechanical drum machine beats. Like that's crazy. That was crazy. I mean, sure, they got that from somewhere. You know, you go back and listen to Metal Urbane, from France. That's where they got that shit from. Or
like Throbbing Gristle.
Throbbing Gristle. I'm a huge Throbbing Gristle fan, and Throbbing Gristle is a perfect example. Like I love Throbbing Gristle, but I don't really remember the songs. Like I remember parts.
Yeah.
But like the sound is what that's all about. Like Throbbing Gristle, SBK, Einstürzende Neubauten was a huge influence on my life. Like I couldn't believe what I was hearing when I heard those records, but I couldn't really sing back the songs. There's no, the sounds I remember, but that's what it is. Same thing. Chrome. Like I love Chrome, and Chrome had a few songs, but mostly it's just about the sounds. It's about the sounds and being like scary soundtrack kind of stuff. However, I digress because we're talking about like the sludge and stoner stuff. The first Queens of Stone Age record was really like hit me hard. Like I heard that record and I was like, I want more of this kind of stuff, like this spacey, hawkwindy desert stuff. And that became kind of really trendy, really trendy, really fast, especially in the cities, like especially in New York City. That all of a sudden there was, like this retro trend, and I was right there on it. Like Ben and Nick from Sweet Diesel were playing together, and they had asked me to play with them, and so we that's when we started. We did the Brought Low. Within 6 months we did a demo, and within a year we were in the studio doing a record for TP Records. So at that point we did that. I did the Brought Low record and produced the first Bad Wizard record within a month of each other. I started doing a bunch of work for TP Records and was doing, that. So I got really deep into that stuff. There was all these, besides the desert stuff that was coming out of the Palm Springs and Joshua Tree, there was a whole scene here, not just in New York, with bands doing sort of the retro rock thing, but there was a whole scene. There's a giant scene down in Jersey, like the Red Bank area. Like the Red Bank area had like, Monster Magnet, Atomic Bitchwax, Black NASA, Core. I love that band. Core was so cool. Lord Sterling. All these bands were like, they were just coming out of the woodwork. Like there was a whole like desert scene in the South New Jersey. We started playing down there. We would play at New Brunswick at Core Tavern, which was great. We'd play with like Atomic Bitchwax and all these other bands. It was killer. It was so much fun. That got me deep into that stuff for a while. And whatever stuck, like some of the stuff, like of course, like with any kind of trendy genre or whatnot. Some stuff sticks, most stuff doesn't, and some stuff sticks. And at the time, that kind of, it was cool because it was kind of melding the desert stoner stuff and the retro stuff with sludge started coming in. Like there was a point where, like, as different as they are, a band like Soylent Green would fit in on a show with like Atomic Bitchwax, even though they were completely, really, when it comes right down to it, they're not doing the same thing. But that scene caught sort of, and engulfed it all, same, that, which was cool at the time. If people were more open-minded, I guess.
Yeah.
We're becoming more open-minded, because years before that, it would have been things, the rules started bending, that we had already seen how the crossover in hardcore and metal came together, and it started becoming more acceptable to have those bands play together and whatnot. And now it's completely normal. It's completely normal to have Obituary on tour with Agnostic Front.
Yeah.
Like, so that's cool. I think that's cool, because at least it's more open-minded and getting a lot of people into different stuff. But with that scene, it kind of engulfed all this stuff. So it was pretty exciting at the time. Brought low. We did a full U.S. tour on that first record, and then I did another tour South by Southwest, and then that kind of fell apart for me. But I was still working with bands like Bad Wizard and some other bands in the studio and doing records of that kind of nature.
Just want to talk about like you doing Records of Ruin, your show.
Yeah.
Like what's that process like, putting together a playlist and all that? And I'm assuming that like one of the advents and one of the boons to this is like, this has to keep you kind of like on the cusp of like sort of what's new and exciting in metal.
Yeah. Well, I try to keep my show pretty diverse. I try to. When it comes to my show on Gimme Metal, like I try to mix it up with some classic metal and whatever's new, and sometimes I'll just go off. I mean, I've had a bunch of shows where it's just all brand new stuff, because that's what I was just scouring, for new stuff. But now I try to mix it up as much as possible, because it's really just what I want to hear for the most part, or want to listen to. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of stuff I play on there that's brand new, and then I'll play it once and forget I even played it. Like I'll have fans write me and they're like, "You played this band, and you totally turned me on to this band. And I fucking love them, and I saw them. I bought all their records." I don't remember. I don't remember what band you're talking about, but it's right there on the list that I played them. Like it'll be like that sometimes, and then sometimes it's like I'll play classic stuff that nobody cares about. That's to me is the most important thing ever, but nobody cares. That's how it goes. But as far as putting together shows, it's gotten more and more difficult. I'm up to almost 170 shows now.
Wow.
So it's gotten more and more difficult to keep things interesting. I'm trying to keep things interesting, so I try to stay on the cusp of new stuff, as well as trying to discover stuff that was forgotten and or lost, or even lost in my own collection. So I try to mix it up. Luckily, I get, being on the radio station, you get a million emails from all these publicists and record labels that tell you what's new, and being a big time record buyer, I'm getting a ton of emails via Bandcamp from all these labels and bands. So I try to keep a list of what's new, and I listen through them. Some of the records I buy, if I like it, and I just keep a list on my phone. And then for every new show, I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to play this, and this, and that." And I try to keep it interesting. But that's why I used to do a show every week, and I had to go down to twice a month. It was too much. It was too much. It was too much. Like trying to put together an interesting show every week there's an art to that. That's why like famous DJs who do that get paid a lot of money. I'm not getting paid a lot of money at all. So it's like, so I had to go down to, since I'm also for Gimme Metal, I also produce other people's shows. So a DJ send me their playlist and their voice tracks, and I have to put it all together. So I do that. That's what I do all week. I mean, that's what I'm doing all week. All week I'm putting together, anywhere between 8 to 15 shows a week. So my show's sort of, that's why I had to go down to twice a month, because I was like, my show is going to suffer if I have to do a new show every week. There's no way it's going to be good. There's no way. I'm just going to be throwing together whatever I can. I end up doing more than that because I also program Ross the Boss. Ross the Boss has a show on Gimme Metal as well, and I program his show because he doesn't care. Like if it was up to him, he'd just play like, side one of Disraeli Gears by Cream. Just let it go. He doesn't care because he. So I put together a show for him every twice a month. I'll put together a show for him that I think fits his taste and fits kind of reflects what his bands and his music, and a lot of people just think it's Manowar, but it's not. It's also Dictators. It's also there's a lot of other stuff going on there. So that's what's great about doing a show for him. Like I'm able to play punk stuff like Dead Boys and Sex Pistols, and then mix it up with, Crimson Glory and Halloween, Hammerfall and Manowar, of course, and his band, and Ross the Boss band, and everything that he's into, like AC/DC and Cream and Mountain and all the proto metal stuff that he loves, and stuff that he grew up on. But honestly, if it was up to him, he'd just play BB King records. I mean, BB King's his favorite. That's what he loves.
Yeah.
BB King, his favorite bands ever, BB King and Cream. And that's what, if it was up to him, that's what he'd be playing. But try to keep it a little more interesting than that.
Well, on that note, what have you been listening to lately? Anything of note?
Lately, as far as new stuff goes, I've just been listening to drips and drabs of stuff. Hard to remember because so much stuff comes in and I can't even remember. Give me 1 second. I got to look at something because this is what happens when you get old. You can't remember. You can't remember anything. So I have to look up what I bought, I can't remember anything. Like I said, I listen to WGNY oldies all day. So kind of a problem. I'll tell you what I bought recently that I really like. This band Vicious Blade from
I don't know them.
From Vicious Blade is from Pittsburgh, killer, thrashy death metal, female singer who fucking rips. She's great. Oh, I got, I went on this like kind of tangent of female fronted or female bands because I was working with, I did the record for, I did not the record, I produced the show on Gimme Metal for Castrator, the band Castrator.
It's a great name for a band.
Yeah, they're all female death metal band. It was amazing. So they had all this cool stuff on their list, and then other stuff came up because of that, like this band Aptera from Berlin, Hulder.
Hulder's great.
Hulder and what other band? I got back into Dictators, all female death metal band, and a lot of female fronted stuff like Vicious Blade and Savage Master and stuff like that. It's just really great to see these bands. It's great to see not only the acceptance of, it used to be, it used to be the same shit that women always say, you're pretty good for a girl, or, they're pretty cool for a girl band. It's like, that shit is out the window now. Thank the gods, that shit, like now it's like, these bands come out. Luckily, most people, I don't think, care anymore. I think, I don't know. Now, me, I never cared. So I really don't care anymore about that. But hopefully more people are open-minded to be like, doesn't matter what sex they are or what they are. It just, as long as they rip, they rip. So that's what I've been excited about. As far as newer stuff that I've bought recently that I've been listening to, I mean, I got the new Horns and Hooves record's really good, and Grave Infestation. I'm really looking forward to this Crippled Black Phoenix. The single's great. What else? I mean, I've been buying the stuff. I don't know what I've been listening to so much. It's hard to. Oh yeah, well, listen. Everything on Dark Descent is really great. The new Berater record's great. Prescription, Desolate Shrine, Malignant Altar. I'm liking all that stuff. I'm liking a lot of stuff on Everlasting Spew records, like the Ritual Necromancy Fossilization split is really cool. Acculst is pretty cool. But I mean, like, to be completely honest, am I really sitting down and listening to these records? Not really. I mean, I'm sort of listening to songs, and then I'm so busy with other shit, honestly, that I'm not taking the time to listen to these records, and I should, because it's kind of pathetic that I have all of them and then not listening to them. But it's all good stuff. I'm trying to think of what else is cool. I like the new Motivation record. I don't know if you heard that. It's really crazy shit. And
I feel like I did listen to that, and I thought it was pretty good.
yeah, it's like a pyramid scheme heavy metal stuff. It's like
Yeah, it's
like,
really bizarre.
yeah, it's like Genesis Peorage is on the record before Jen died, and but it's like that. It's like if Throbbing Gristle did a heavy metal project and decided to make it into a cult situation, it's really cool. New Death Hammer's great. They're always great. I like this band Black Parade. It's
Oh yeah, I just wrote them down to check out. It's like a
Black Parade is
one person
band. Yeah, but it's
black metal band.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's
Indigenous, I think.
yeah,
Indigenous person.
He's a Native American doing all songs about the Native American situation and Native American struggles. Really cool stuff. And what else? I really like the new Behold the Monolith record. Speaking of
me too. Loved it.
Doom, speaking of Doom stuff, it's like
that was Doom.
Yeah, that record's really great. Honestly, a lot of stuff on Ripple's fantastic. Todd has great taste. As far as like Doom and stoner stuff goes, his stuff is pretty much top notch. Like everything on his label is really top notch. Like he's putting out some really cool stuff. He just did a show on Gimme Metal as well. It's really good. Been listening to that. Been listening to a bunch of stuff. Speaking of more doomy stuff, there's a label out of Seattle called Satanic Royalty Records.
Oh yeah, with Freiberger. I've had Freiberger on before, and I've had a few of their bands on, like 3 of them. And
yeah, he's
John
a great guy.
Sandrider has been on a couple times.
Yeah, I like Eris. Eris is good, and
yeah, Eris is great.
And
Dark Meditation is great.
I love the Dark Meditation record. I think that record is fantastic. It's funny because when I was growing up, I really wasn't into the goth stuff at all. But now I appreciate it more, and I really appreciate the goth metal crossover.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to the Decibel Fest, the Decibel tour, and I think it was 2012 or 13. I don't remember when it was, but I went to the Decibel tour, and that's when I saw it. It was their last tour. I saw In Solitude. And In Solitude was fucking great. I was like, wow, what is going on here? This is like goth, but metal. And this was new at the time. At the time, I was like, this is interesting. And then there's all these bands that kind of rode off that I really like. I really like Unto Others. I think that band is fantastic. And then that got me into Dark Meditation, which I think is great. I think it's great band, really cool stuff. I like a lot of that stuff, which is funny because I didn't like, at the time when I was growing up, the goth thing I didn't like. I like it now. Like now, when I go back and I was like, oh wow, the Sisters of Mercy actually are really cool, But at the time, I didn't like that stuff. At the time, for me, it was like dance music, for like kids who weren't into punk but wanted to look cool, Like I thought that was kind of lame. But now I like it. Now I think it's cool. So all these new bands that are embracing that and doing it in a metal way, I think it's super cool. I think that Unto Others and Dark Meditation are doing really cool stuff. Unto Others, I think are fantastic. Songs are great.
What were they called before? They changed their name. Right? That's what they were. I saw them once. What else? There's a bunch of good stuff that came out lately. There's this like extreme death metal band from Calgary called Wake. I've enjoyed their stuff before, but their new record, Thought Form Descent, is excellent. The new Mantar album is very extreme, but also very catchy. I don't know where they're from, but there's this band called Nurser, and they're like a death grind band. They put out a great fucking record.
Oh, I gotta hear that.
There's this awesome, I think they're from Baltimore, like a crossover hardcore thrash band called End It, and they have an album or an EP. They have a release out called Unpleasant Living.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of my favorite records of the year so far. The new Nebula album was fun.
What, Nebula has a new record?
Yeah. Found this weird raw black metal band about dinosaurs called Dinosauros. I mean, it's like fucking really raw shit, man.
Yeah, I think we played them on the air.
What else? There's this really sick like 70s psych prog throwback krautrock band out called Birth. And I found out about them. Their new album, Born, is excellent.
Yeah,
great
good.
artwork by David D'Andrea, who was on a few months back.
Yeah, we played some of that on the air. That's really cool stuff.
And then just in terms of other stuff, you're talking about Atomic Bitchwax. I was listening to Force Field the other day. Went back and listened to Blackwater Park by Opeth. It took a long time to get through. It's a long album. Skinny Puppy. I love Skinny Puppy. Two Dark Park Rabies are excellent. And we talk about Obituary a lot. So listen to Frozen in Time. And that album fucking rules. I'm hoping I go see them because I saw them and Carcass at Maryland Death Fest, but like it was such an insane day. I had to leave early, and they just announced they were going on tour with Amon Amarth and Cattle Decap, and I'm hoping I can get out to see that show because I love Obituary and Carcass.
Yeah, Obituary is great.
And Cattle Decap.
Yeah, I've seen Cattle Decapitation live, and they were amazing, like unbelievable, like really unbelievable players, like great, like really wild show. And Obituary is always great live. I've seen them a couple times. Carcass I've seen like 5 or 6 times. They're always great. They're one of my favorites, Carcass. But I'm a huge Thin Lizzy fan. I'm a fan of anything with guitarmonies, like Thin Lizzy, Wishbone Ash. So I automatically love Carcass, because Carcass is basically the death metal Thin Lizzy. That's basically what they are. They're basically playing Thin Lizzy songs, but just death metal. It's great. It's amazing, and they'll readily admit that. And I love that stuff, man. They're so good live. They're just the playing is just unreal, like really unbelievable guitar playing. But don't miss them. They come through, and Obituary is always great. I saw them once. Where did I see? I saw them, I think, twice at St. Vitus. But that guitar player from Obituary, 2 of the guys from Obituary, I saw them with. They were playing in Melakesh. Remember Melakesh, the band Melakesh?
No, is that like one of the side projects they did or something?
No. Melakesh is it's a band, but it's really just one guy, and he has hired guns played.
Oh, okay.
But he's Israeli guy, and he's put out a bunch of records. They're really cool stuff. They were great. I saw Melakesh once with another cool band that disappeared right after this tour. Was Lightning Swords of Death from LA. They were really cool. They were a cool band. Both bands are great, and then they never came around again. And Melakesh, I think they just reissued. I don't think they have a new record, but they reissued. They were just on Gimme Metal as well recently, but really cool band.
Do you have anything, got anything in the works right now, or anything that you want to plug?
Right now, no. I mean, the only thing I can plug right now, I will say this: the pandemic really killed my creativity, because I had all this work going on, both production work and supposed to go on tour with all these bands and stuff, and everything got destroyed. Yeah. So that kind of killed my creativity in a lot of ways. Like I was actually excited about the lockdown. I was like, I'm going to stay at home and play guitar and write songs, and I did nothing. All I did was work and do whatever I had to do to get money together to buy a house. So that kind of ruined my creativity in a lot of ways. So I'm just starting to play out again. And okay, so the only thing I have coming up, I'm playing with the Mighty High. We're playing August 19th on what we're opening for Speed Dealer and the Super Suckers on that Rocks Off concert cruise that goes around Manhattan. So that should be nice. Fun. That should be fun as fuck. That's always great. And those guys are great. I'm old friends with Speed Dealer guys, and the Super Suckers guys are fucking great dudes too. So we're looking forward to that. And then not much else. I mean, Osaka Pop Star is supposed to go back into the studio and start doing stuff again. I hope so. I don't know what's happening with that. Everyone's so busy. I'm doing another band. We were just talking about Atomic Bitchwax with Bob Pantella, the drummer from Atomic Bitchwax. I'm doing this band called Secret Fox, which is really just a cover band, but Bob was the original drummer we were playing with, and then he got too busy, but now he's coming back in the fold, so I'm really looking forward to playing with Bob again, and I think we're going to start writing originals and stuff, but that's really fun. It's all like Jersey guys, like Red Bank, Red Bank area, Jersey guys, and so that's been really fun. But nothing really. I mean, I wish I had more stuff to plug, but everything kind of fell out the wayside with the pandemic. Everything just stopped. so so I never really picked up on stuff again, and I got wholeheartedly involved with the radio station. So I can plug that. I can say definitely sign up for Gimme Metal. It's free. You just go to gimmemetal.com, sign up for free. There's no obligation whatsoever. You listen for free, and it's great. I mean, we have amazing shows. We have guest bands come on, and like for example, this Saturday will be we were talking about Savage Master. They're doing a show. Aris did a show once, and we get these labels to come on to do shows like Redefining Darkness and Seeing Red, and all these other labels come on and do shows. And we have Amon Amarth doing a special every week for this month, and so definitely go and sign up for that. And if you're into country, we have a country station, Gimme Country, which is really great. We don't play that new country stuff; it's real country, so that's good. But other than that, not much else to plug. I mean, just trying to keep up with work with that. But I hope something comes up. There is a possibility next year I might be going on tour with this band Far Flung. This band Far Flung?
Can't say I do.
Really interesting stuff. It's like krautrock psych stuff. It's my friend Tommy's band. My friend Tommy used to be in Chrome, and he used to be in Hawkwind. So definitely has a pedigree there, and they're pretty well known in that kind of psych drone post krautrock stuff going on in Europe. So hopefully we'll do something. Supposed to play bass with those guys. So it hasn't happened yet because everyone's so busy and everyone's in different places. Tommy lives not too far from me here, but rest of the band is like split up between California, and one guy lives in Milan, Italy. So
wow.
So to get together, it's going to be a whole rigmarole thing. So we'll see what happens. But hopefully that'll happen, because that'll get me back out on the road. We'll see. It's just been weird times. Getting older is weird. Like, if this was happening 10, 15 years ago, I'd be freaking the fuck out. I'd be like, I'd be, tearing down people's doors trying to get into bands and do all this stuff. But at this point in my life, it's like, yeah, it sucks. Like I was so used to being on the road all the time. And when I wasn't on the road, I was working with other bands in the studio, and I miss it. Don't get me wrong. And it was the best. But at this age now, I just kind of accepted that whatever comes, and I'm just not that young and hungry anymore, which kind of sucks, but what can you do? I am really lucky to still be working in music nonstop. I'm lucky about that, and I'm lucky that I'm exposed to great stuff, and I'm lucky that I'm still playing. I'm definitely still playing, but it's not like it was. I wish it was. I wish I was constantly, booking tours and going out on the road. And I love traveling. I love traveling to Europe and Asia and stuff like that. It's the best. And I love going to cool cities in America. Like I really miss, hitting Chicago and Detroit and Minneapolis and Los Angeles and San Francisco, Seattle and Portland and all that kind of shit. And Austin, Texas. I love all those towns. If it happens again, which hopefully it will. And if it doesn't, soon I'll be 60. I'm going to be 52 in another couple of weeks. And it's like, but then I look at Ross the Boss touring constantly. He's going to be 70 like next year, like 69 or 70 years old. And keeps you young, you'd never know, so we'll see what happens. It's just been weird times with the pandemic. It's really put a fucking wrench into everything, for everybody.
It did. I've said it many times. Didn't expect to be running this thing through the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird. It's a weird. I think back to it, and I'm like, this is a weird document of this period of time where everybody had a kind of a unique tale, but at the same time, we all sort of had the same story.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell people where they can find you? I think it's just Dean Rispler on Instagram, and follow Gimme Metal and Gimme Radio on Instagram, and that probably will direct you to where to find shit.
Yeah, I'm the only social media I'm on now is Instagram, because I had to leave Facebook during the pandemic. It was just insane. Like It's still insane.
Yeah, it is.
And they're all insane, but Facebook was the worst. Facebook was like everyone was a political, medical, and military expert. You know, it didn't matter if you were left or right. It didn't matter. Everyone was a fucking expert. So I couldn't take it anymore. I was just like, I was reading people's posts and I'm like, I know you personally. You barely graduated high school, if you graduated at all. And you know, like you're talking politics or military expertise or medical expertise is even worse. So scary, really scary. So I had to get off. So I'm just on Instagram. It's just Dean Rispler and on Instagram. And also, again, go to gimmemetal.com and you could find me on there. I'm on there a lot more than I'd like to admit, but it's, you know, I produce a lot of shows, so I'm in the chat room quite a bit. So hit me up on there. But this was a blast, though. Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I thank you for coming on. I appreciate it as well. And yeah, check out Dean in a couple of weeks if you can with the Mighty High. We'll be back next week, hopefully, with another chapter of Diary of Doom. And that'll do it for this week's chapter.
Thank you. Thank you, Dylan. And thank you for everyone who's listening. Appreciate it.